Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme, Yoko Ono will be with me to discuss life with and life after John Lennon. America's ambassador to the Organization of American States on Obama and Cuba. This weekend's elections in Iran and last weekend's ones in Lebanon. But first, Zimbabwe. It's just 4 months since Morgan Tsvangirai was sworn in as Prime Minister. Now the former opposition leader is touring Europe and the United States to try to garner support for his country's power-sharing government amid accusations that his followers are still enduring intimidation and violence at the hands of President Mugabe's henchmen. Today he's in Washington, and we caught up with him just before a crucial meeting with President Barack Obama. A progress report, first of all, briefly, on how you think the new government is doing after 4 months.
Well, thank you very much, Sir David Frost. I think we can conclude that the inclusive government has performed beyond expectation. It has consolidated itself, and on a number of benchmarks, it has performed extremely well, and I'll mention a few. That we have managed to arrest the hyperinflation condition from 500 billion% to 3% currently. We have reopened schools, we have reopened hospitals. We have begun to give the people of Zimbabwe not only hope but confidence that the future is bright and that this process is irreversible.
Well, that's a very, very strong list. I mean, what about human rights? Has there been any improvement in that yet?
Absolutely, there has been an improvement from the siege mentality of fear that had characterized our political environment to a situation where people are able to express themselves and go about their business. Of course, we are concerned about some of the incidents of arrests, arbitrary arrests, but we deal with them politically, and as I speak, I don't think there is anyone who is behind bars because of political reasons. And we are continuing to improve the human rights record because it's an essential part of stabilization.
And how's the working relationship with Robert Mugabe?
I'm the last one to defend Robert Mugabe's record in the past. But we have since agreed that we will work together for the national interest. And since then, we have set the agenda of trying to pull our country out of the precipice and try to deal with those issues that are essential. And at a personal level, I think that there is, although there are differences from time to time, we differ respectfully.
Differ respectfully. And in terms of decisions, what's the most major decision that you've got to make next, really?
Well, the major decision we have to make is to move away from the humanitarian support to a recovery program, and there are major legislative and policy decisions that are necessary to create the necessary foundation for building national, international confidence in investing in the country. And I think those are the target areas on the economy, on the Reserve Bank, on the rule of law, and on ensuring that we are creating a society which is very confident.
So when you meet with European leaders, and right now today with the President, what is it that you most need from the President? What do you most need from the leaders in Europe and so on?
First of all, I think at a re-engagement level, we have to explain that they have to appreciate that Zimbabwe is emerging from a post-conflict situation with all the characteristics of political and economic decay. And therefore, not only should we be moving from supporting Zimbabweans on the humanitarian front, but also to move to a situation where we can now talk about transitional support in terms of institutional and economic support in other areas.
Yes, because one of the problems, of course, is that I think the Dutch said this, but it is that in terms of how can they, a lot of people are thinking the question, how can they help you and your people without bolstering the support of Robert Mugabe, increasing his length of time?
Well, let me tell you, the fact of the matter is that if the MDC and Morgan Tsvangirai do not succeed, then you have stamped out the hope that people have over this government. Yes, President Robert Mugabe has been in power for 30 years. People don't look up to him for any new ideas. The young ideas are coming from the other wing of the coalition. And that even ZANU-PF appreciates the fact that together in this government, we can have this, what I would call, shared legitimacy. But if one of us were to pull out of this inclusive government, there will be no legitimacy for anyone. So I think the most important thing to emphasize is that this process needs the support because it is in the best interest of supporting those who are engaged in the reform exercise. If you don't do it, then you are only feeding and supporting those that are anti-reform.
And when you were talking about the economy earlier, in that terribly difficult area of the economy, when you were talking about the rate of inflation, did I hear you right when you said from billions you'd got it down to 3%?
3%.
That's extraordinary, because we read these stories. I mean, that would suggest that there is really a chance of bringing plenty to your public, because we read today in the story, which you may have seen, a tragic story about Zimbabwe girls trade sex for food because they can't, 12-year-old girls who trade sex for books or biscuits or chips and so on and so forth. I mean, that's a tragic story.
Well, those may be tragic stories, and I appreciate the fact that there will be these kind of desperate cases, but those do not represent the major thrust of economic recovery. Yes, our country was on the brink. All the indices were down. And so you will have this remnant of desperate people around. And I cannot suppress that. But what is important is, have we laid the foundation for proper economic recovery? And that recovery, you can't put a time frame. We've only been 3 months in government. And I think people should give this government the benefit of doubt after a while.
I see. But at the same time, some of your supporters, anyway, have said that they still feel intimidated. They still fear violence from the ZANU-PF or somebody else, but they don't feel safe yet. Are they wrong? Should they feel safe now?
I think that what they have to appreciate is that their placing their confidence in this government is first and foremost not misplaced. They are cautiously optimistic, the majority of Zimbabweans. The majority of Zimbabweans don't want to go back to the situation that existed prior to the inclusive government. And therefore, the majority want to see incremental gains being scored on all the areas, including human rights, including ensuring that Zimbabweans have moved away from this culture of fear and the culture of impunity.
Because there was this quote here from your Minister of National Healing and Reconciliation, Sikai Holland, who said this week that Zimbabwe is facing fresh violence and that some members of ZANU-PF, quote, have a list of people that they will kill, unquote. Basically, you don't think that's true anymore. Is that your message to the world today?
Well, I don't know where she is getting that. But you know that we are emerging from a traumatic period in which violence was an instrument of cohesion and control. So I'll be the last one to confirm that those incidents either are happening at individual level, or in the majority of cases, there is no evidence that there is a general campaign of intimidation and violence in the country.
So what you've got to do is to convince the world that there's been real progress on human rights and all of those issues, so that they will come in with support, financial support and other support, which, as we said earlier, they're not doing at the moment necessarily. But that's what you've got to convince them of, isn't it? In your tour now.
It's not what the world would set us as benchmarks. It's not what Zimbabweans are saying, it's what we do on the ground that will earn the international confidence. And for me, it is important when we are engaging the world that Zimbabwe has been isolated for the last 10 years and has been treated as a pariah state. We are now here, and that Zimbabwe is changing, that it needs to re-engage the world to be part of the family of nations and not to be an isolated pariah state.
Well, there's no doubt that you personally and the people of Zimbabwe have the good wishes of the world at this particular time, and you particularly, really, because in one sense this has been an inspiring year for you, but in one sense it's been a terrible year in the sense of the tragic accident that happened to your wife, your dear wife. Some people say that they think that that was an assassination attempt on you. Do you think that?
Well, there was that speculation, but I want to confirm that I was involved in that accident, and as I stated earlier, at the time of the accident, I genuinely believe that this was an accident, and that there is no basis, in spite of the general atmosphere of suspicion, I have no reason to believe that it could have been an attempt on my life. It's unfortunate that my wife passed away under those circumstances, but certainly I cannot make a dishonest assessment of what happened that day.
But what's given you the strength to carry on? I mean, your life, you're on a precipice of tension at the moment. You've got to live with this loss and so on. What is it gives you the moral strength to continue?
I'm sure that Susan, bless her soul, I'm sure that she would have wanted both my family, my party, and the whole nation would say that I have to continue. I have to continue for the sake of all those people who have perished, and for the sake of the country to move forward, that I cannot give up now. So that becomes my daily motivation and the motivation to continue on this path.
Well, it's a pleasure to welcome you again to the program, and will we have the opportunity of welcoming Zimbabwe soon back to the Commonwealth?
I'm sure. Let's take time. It takes time. Some of these things take time to consider. It's not automatic, and therefore I think that at the end of the day, Zimbabwe must be accepted as a democratic, prosperous member and a respectable member of the family of nations.
Thank you very much indeed. The world is, I think the world is on your side. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again, Morgan.
Thank you indeed.
Morgan Tsvangirai. In a minute, Walid Jumblat on those Lebanese elections. That's after this short break.